This notorious criminal put his prison sentence to incredible use. Who was the real Birdman of Alcatraz? The life of Robert Stroud, better known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, is one of complexity and fascination. A convicted murderer with a record that made him one of the most notorious criminals in the United States, he would also become a well-respected ornithologist during his time in prison. Born in Seattle in 1890, Stroud's life started in the way of many future criminals. By the age of 13, life with his abusive alcoholic father had become too much and he fled. By 18, Stroud was living in Alaska, earning money as a pimp. In 1909, he was on trial for manslaughter after shooting dead a man who had failed to pay his prostitute. Following the incident, he had made his way to a police station, surrendering himself and his weapon. A 12-year sentence in the federal penitentiary at McNeil Island, Washington was given. Unknown to Stroud at the time, he would never live as a free man again. As prisoner number 1853, Robert Stroud quickly established himself as one of the prison's most violent prisoners. Like a caged animal, he was in a permanent state of anger, frequently assaulting his fellow inmates and staff. An extended sentence of 6 months and transfer to a Kansas prison followed. On March 26, 1916, he cemented his future behind bars when he fatally stabbed a cafeteria guard who reprimanded him for a minor rule violation that would have annulled his visitation privilege to finally see his younger brother after 8 years. Convicted of first-degree murder, Stroud was sentenced to death. 2 subsequent trials would see the prisoner sentenced to death by hanging. Incredibly, after his mother appealing to President Woodrow Wilson, Stroud's execution was halted just 8 days before it was due to be carried out. Instead, it was determined by the president's attorney general that Robert Stroud would instead spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. This unexpected twist of events would have a direct and positive effect on the world's bird population. As he started his new sentence in solitary confinement, Stroud found a nest in the prison yard containing 3 injured sparrows. The prisoner took them back to his cell and successfully raised them to adulthood. Learning that inmates were sometimes allowed to purchase canaries, he soon had a growing collection of birds for company, whom he dedicated every moment of his abundant time to. Using a razor blade and a nail for tools, he soon started making bird cages out of wooden crates, which he was able to sell for supplies and to help support his mother in small ways. When a new warden came to Leavenworth Penitentiary, Stroud's luck was in. With a focus on inmate rehabilitation, William Biddle was impressed by the lone inmate and provided him with cages, chemicals, and stationery to help him pursue his ornithological studies. Soon, visitors were being permitted visits to Stroud's growing aviary, many leaving with the purchase of a canary. As the years passed, Stroud not only raised hundreds of canaries, but also began to write. In 1933, the 60,000-word Diseases of Canaries was smuggled from the prison, with a later updated edition following. These books contain several important contributions to avian pathology. Of most note was a cure for the hemorrhagic septicemia family of diseases. In the ornithology world, Stroud became well respected. Prison management, however, were beginning to regret their forward-thinking attitude to rehabilitation. With each letter sent or received required to be read, copied, and approved, Stroud's ever-growing business required a full-time prison secretary. There was also the issue of his filthy cell. In 1931, efforts were made to thwart the efforts of the Birdman, but one step ahead, and with a bird researcher, Delamere Jones, on his side, Stroud released his story to newspapers and magazines. The huge letter campaign that followed, combined with a 50,000 signature petition sent to President Herbert Hoover, resulted in him being permitted to keep his birds, even being granted a second cell in which to house them. Stroud and the bird researcher would become so close during this time that she even relocated to Kansas to start a business with the prisoner, helping him sell his avian medicines. As efforts of exasperated prison officials intensified to transfer Stroud to another prison, he and Jones married after discovering a law that forbade the transfer of prisoners married in Kansas. The effort would, however, eventually prove futile when it was discovered that he had been using some of his lab equipment to brew alcohol alcohol, in 1942 Stroud was transferred to Alcatraz with his business and beloved birds required to remain in Leavenworth. He was given just 10 minutes notice that he was leaving. In Alcatraz, Stroud spent 6 years in segregation and another 11 confined to the hospital wing, allowed access to the prison library. He began to study law and wrote 2 manuscripts, an autobiography titled Bobby and Looking Outward, a history of the U.S. prison system from colonial times to the formation of the Bureau of Prisons. After years of good behavior and signs of proactive rehabilitation, Stroud petitioned the government that his long prison term amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. He believed one of the obstacles that prevented his release was that he was an admitted homosexual. Opinion about the notorious prisoner has long been divided. Crime author Carl Sifakais considers Stroud a brilliant self-taught expert on birds and possibly the best-known example of self-improvement and rehabilitation in the U.S. prison system. In the bird world, there were also thousands of bird breeders and poultry raisers who formed a committee to demand the ornithologist's release. But following the 1962 film Birdman of Alcatraz, in which Burt Lancaster played Stroud, his former inmates weren't so sure, saying that in real life he was far more dangerous, sinister and unpleasant than his fictional character, with one going so far as saying he was a vicious killer. I think Burt Lancaster owes us all an apology. Ultimately, whether or not Stroud was indeed rehabilitated enough to re-enter society was a decision that never arrived. When Robert Stroud died at the age of 73 in the Springfield Medical Center for Federal Prisoners, he had been incarcerated for 54 years, of which 42 had been spent in solitary confinement.